I wanted to tell you today about the journey of a manuscript. It's a 1,000-year-old journey. Now, the story actually starts in 2009 in a little town of Leicester, England, kind of the rural capital of England. There was, in 2009, they had a display of some recent artifacts from the area. And on display was this ancient Greek New Testament manuscript of the Gospels. It was a manuscript that was unknown to biblical scholars. A friend of mine, whom I have never even met, was in Leicester, and he saw this in the display case, and he thought, oh, this is a manuscript that CSNTM should know about, and maybe photograph if we can. So he emailed me, said, I found this manuscript. It's not known to biblical scholars. Would you be interested in photographing this? And of course, our response is, of course we would. We're always interested in photographing these manuscripts. So I said, if you could find out who the owner is, let us know about it, and we can see if we can come and do it. Well, it just so happened that I was in Germany for another project a few months later, and then I was flying over to England to speak to the Northwest London Diocese of Anglican priests at their annual conference. And while I was there, we were able to drive out to this private home somewhere in the UK that I'm not allowed to reveal. But we met this couple. We stayed in their home. The house was built hundreds of years ago. And they put us up while we were to photograph that manuscript. We were supposed to drive to London the next morning and fly back to Germany so we could continue our work. Well, it turned out that we got to their home a little bit late, about 5 in the afternoon, about 3 or 4 hours later than we wanted to be there. And so they let us stay at their place overnight. And they said, we're going to leave for work in the morning. When you leave, just lock the door and throw the key in the door slot, the mail slot. So I thought, why would you trust us? You don't even know us. I told them that. They said, well, we've been checking out you just like you've been checking out us. So they trusted us. We had a great time talking to them that night. We worked till very late in the wee hours of the morning. We left that next morning, photographed the manuscript, not even knowing what we really had, except that it was a Gospels manuscript that I dated to about the second half of the 10th century. So we get back to America. We have a student at another school on the East Coast where I was giving some lectures at a winter course, and he was interested in textual criticism. He said, I'd really like to write my master's thesis on any new discoveries. I said, this is a manuscript you should write your thesis on. So he wrote his thesis on what is now officially known as Codex 2907. Really exciting name, right? Well, the fact is that this is a manuscript that has been dated to the 10th century by scholars who know this area better than I do. It is now officially known to New Testament scholars, and he wrote his master's thesis. Now, part of what a master's thesis is when you're dealing with a manuscript that is a new discovery is you have to transcribe every single letter in the manuscript to tell exactly what it says, and then you analyze that. And as he did this, he found some very interesting textual variants, is what we call them. For example, in Matthew chapter 10, verse 8, it says in the later manuscripts that Jesus tells his disciples to heal the sick, cast out demons, and some other things. But in some of the oldest manuscripts, it says, heal the sick, raise the dead, and cast out demons. But that's not found in the King James Bible. It's not found in the majority of later manuscripts. But this manuscript that normally goes along with these later manuscripts also had that reading that was found just in the older manuscripts, raise the dead. This is fascinating. I think it is making a contribution to the original wording of the New Testament at Matthew chapter 10, verse 8. Well, this student got his thesis done, and I announced it on New Testament circles, and it just so happened that a few years later, back in England again, At Cambridge University is Tyndale House, where some scholars have been working for many years on publishing a Greek New Testament. And they wanted to use as few manuscripts as they could, the oldest manuscripts, except for a couple later ones that they felt were very, very important. And they came across this master's thesis. They published their Greek New Testament just a few years ago called the Tyndale House Greek New Testament. And it uses this manuscript to help them establish the wording of the original text of the New Testament. So here's a manuscript that has been in possession of a family for centuries, a 1,000-year-old manuscript that nobody knew about until it was put on display in a rural town in England. And I find out about it through somebody I've never met before. And I get to England because I'm asked to go and speak at a different conference. And we photograph this manuscript and make it known to the world. And now it has come full circle where it's contributing once again to the wording of the New Testament, but not to people 1,000 years ago, now to people today. So we can go back even earlier than 1,000 years ago. Every single manuscript that we photograph has a story to tell. Every single one does. We just don't always know what the story is going to be. In fact, we never know what the story is going to be. Some of them we don't know a whole lot about. Others we know more about. And here's a manuscript that we know quite a bit about now because of the transcription that was done and because of other features in it. You can see this in the link below on from the library on Codex 2907.